back to this RealPage article. Now, we mentioned new supply, and that has been, yes, the story in 2023, and it's going to be the story in 2024, and that's going to affect rent growth and probably going to make things even more favorable for renters. They can look at that expensive mortgage that they're not paying, but they can also at least breathe easier knowing that the days of record high rent growth, they may be over. It may be more normal rent growth going forward, with a bit of a break for 2024. So
peace from JPAR.
Yeah, I know it's good. It's our friend Jay Parsons. Who else? And this is a familiar refrain that Jay Parsons has repeated in his work at RealPage and elsewhere, which is that apartment supply has been the determining factor for rent growth and multifamily performance in 2023. Even though there were in the wake of that huge surging rents, before it was like, oh, well, we can grow our way, population growth and household formation and demand is such that, we can dump a bunch of new supply and it won't even matter. But now it does matter, and it is a pretty causal effect where you can see, the rent growth in these places with more supply for as a percentage of their current supply. That rent growth, is a little bit worse than those that have had less new supply. And that's the story that Jay Parsons has been, I'm sure he's gratified to know that it came completely true. And for this article, it wasn't necessarily painting that timeline as it was picking out the groups of markets that have had a lot of supply, have had a little supply, or, some, and everywhere really in between. He breaks it out into, I think, how many are there? There are 5 tiers, and I'll just kind of summarize them at first. But what we were looking at, that big orange box in the chart, is the tier 1, which is the big supply, the markets that are adding a ton of new supply, and they're well above their previous peak in apartment supply. The other unstated upshot of this, they're all past their previous peak. Most of these markets. Yeah,
pretty much everything is delivering more.
It's not that the records are being broken. It's like, who's breaking the records the hardest?
Good. Very well.
And that's tier 1, which includes places like Austin, Raleigh, Salt Lake City, Nashville, Charlotte, Phoenix, Denver, and Jacksonville are a little bit on the edge. But
these are all darling markets for apartment investors, Matt.
So
are you telling me that the 15% rent growth that they perform for the next 3 years isn't going to happen?
It may not. That's a good point. Cause and effect. These are the attractive, eye-catching markets that we were talking about every single week in like 2020 and 2021 as like the darling Sunbelt markets. And, I'll include like Boise in there, and like Asheville, these places where it was like cool looking. And
the boom towns, like, and they call them boom towns.
Yeah,
a lot of the kind of those COVID, like work from home, Colorado Springs, Sioux Falls, Port St. Lucia, Lakeland, Fort Myers, Provo, Boise, Asheville, Charleston, Savannah, Myrtle Beach, Pensacola. All sounds like good times.
And as we've mentioned, a week or 2 weeks ago, there are previous narratives of the growth of some of these markets too that play into it too. Yeah. But they caught a lot of attention. Now they're getting a lot of supply. Tier 2, lots of supply, but not crazy. These markets,
not crazy.
I know.
It's a lot, but it's not insane like those guys.
We're not going crazy.
It's not like Austin or Phoenix or anything, but
yeah, and he did say, markets like Dallas, Fort Worth, Seattle, which I was a little surprised about, Atlanta, Tampa, Miami, and Orlando. And, he says, this is a good reminder that not every Sunbelt market is building like Austin or Phoenix. Also, I think it will be interesting to see how the size of a market is correlated with their ability to bounce back from new supply.
Yeah.
But that, that's more of the thing. And I did also want to note the big outlier in that first tier is Huntsville, which by adding 20% of their current supply in 1 year, they had to adjust their y-axis to make room for it in the shot. It's like, oh,
I saw that. I saw.
Probably gave the designer a headache, but
I know. You could have fit in so much more markets. I didn't even see Indianapolis on here because of that.
Well, they're in the list, but definitely not specifically named.
They're not on them.
Going down from there are lots of supply, not crazy. Places like Dallas, Fort Worth, Seattle, Atlanta.
It's more than advertised.
Yeah, that's tier 3, which are these markets could be breaking new supply records, but maybe just barely. Again, it's 1 degree. It's still breaking records. Don't worry.
But it's not. But it's just nothing to write home about.
Yeah. And these are markets where you never haven't seen them at the top of the rent growth lists either. Places like, but only maybe momentarily, and then they kind of went back down. But places San Jose, Philadelphia, Washington D.C., Newark, New Jersey, Long Island, Boston, Sacramento, San Diego, Oakland, Minneapolis, lots of Northeast and California markets, but Minneapolis in the middle there. Again,
like big enough, like, you know,
yeah. They didn't have the story of boom and bust as some of them, and I would argue none of them had the story of like continued stability, but some of these tier 4 and tier 5, which are adding even less supply, that may be the group.
Yeah, so less than advertised.
So tier 4 is where you really see the ones that we have been mentioning, which is kind of these Midwests markets that maybe they are breaking new supply records, but just barely, and the new supply records aren't quite as high as others.
Yeah, there is one market in here that I think it is interesting. They know Houston. Which, you know, there's not really any zoning, so you'd think they'd be just building. It's been a hot market for real estate investors.
Yeah.
There's also been some foreclosures, and there's already been some distress in Houston. I don't know if that has nothing to do with it. But it is surprising to see that Houston has not built as much as some of these other
that's interesting. So
Sunshine States.
Their supply expansion was 3.5%. And wow. DFW, for as huge as it is, their supply is expanding by 5.4. Austin, of course, is expanding by 11.2. Really the kind of darling, in terms of like the high growth market. And San Antonio at 5.8 too. It is
so
really interesting.
Austin is less than advertised. Is that
no? They're comparing.
They're
Houston.
comparing.
Comparatively, Houston is like it's kind of flying under the radar. And another thing too is what differentiates this group. Less than which also includes Midwest markets like Chicago, Indianapolis, Columbus, Kansas City, is that they are kind of these they're a stable market, so they could maybe outperform in their demand story is not fraught like what we have in tier 5. So tier 5 is the minimal supply markets, whereas 4 they were building, but maybe they were kind of keeping things stable in terms of demand. But tier 5 is a small number of exceptions where supply isn't going up, and these are low demand markets that minimize the upside for builders to build there.
Yeah, there's reasons why people didn't build there.
Yeah, well, San Francisco is listed as a notable example in here. I think that there are probably other ones where a town. Not all towns grow all the time, and there are some towns that got the short end of the stick when it comes to the economic growth during the pandemic, and
they didn't get enough PPP dollars.
I don't think so. I remember Midland and Odessa. I don't know how it's doing now, but I remember that was one of the few markets where it was like they were kind of going down when everyone else was going up. Now I'll have to I'll re-edit this and change my tune, but there are exceptions, and I think that San Francisco is worth noting because it's an expensive market. These are markets where maybe where prices were already so high that it kind of excluded the possibility of additional demand, and San Francisco has its own idiosyncratic reason why things are different there. And this is a summary, and again, to repeat myself, along with this useful outline of the differences among the regions, it's this idea that supply is increasing across the board.
Yeah, it's a major factor that is why operations are different this year in 2023 than they have been the last decade or so. I mean, we've experienced the last cycle with minimal supply. It's been ramping up the last several years, but relatively moderate. We were delivering, call it 300,000 units a year, high 200s, low 300s. Now we're at 500,000. There's another 500,000. So, I mean, those are significant increases. And we're seeing weakness across the country. I mean, we still have just across our portfolio. I mean, it's patchy. We're still seeing some strong growth in some areas, at some properties. Other, we're not, the rents are going backwards by any means, but we're not seeing really much meaningful growth, just kind of maintaining and getting through some periods of some units getting delivered. And we're not in high supply markets either. That's the other thing. I mean, we're in the what is the tier, not the last year.
We're the less than advertised.
We're the less than advertised, which we like that. That's kind of, I think that's a good spot to be. We don't want to be advertised.
Yeah, I kind of agree.